guys! Today I'm doing part 2 of Terrance Fisher versus Freddie Francis. So in part 1 I picked 7 random films from each director, and in this video I'm going to have the 7 films against each other. The first to win 4 points goes through to the next round. So this is just for fun and it's just my opinion. Yours is probably different to mine. Another interesting thing is the 14 films that were picked, 7 from each director. Everyone's either good or brilliant. So it just goes to show how good they were as directors. Peter Cushing stars in 10 of the 14 films that were picked, and Christopher Lee stars in 6 of them. So anyway, let's start. And round 1 has The Gorgon from Terrance Fisher against The Evil of Frankenstein from Freddie Francis. Both were made in 1964. So The Gorgon, it's a team-up with Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. However, this one has a difference. Peter Cushing's the villain and Christopher Lee's the hero. Also, they have a female monster, which was kind of unique at the time. The trouble with this film is the monster's kept in the shadows until the end of the film, where they reveal the monster at the end, and this happened quite a lot with Hammer films. They were kind of worried in case the audience laughed at the monster makeup. But the makeup looks pretty good. However, compared to Terrance Fisher's other films, this is kind of average. The second film from Freddie Francis, The Evil of Frankenstein, I've reviewed on the channel. It's the only film in the Cushing Hammer Frankenstein series that wasn't directed by Terrance Fisher, and it's kind of more of a reboot of the Frankenstein series. I think they were trying to make the monster more prominent in this series from now on. They were trying to copy the Universal Frankenstein series, probably having the monster featured in all the films. And they had the rights to Karloff's makeup, so the monster looks similar. However, the makeup's not a patch off the Universal Frankenstein monster. And it's one of the weakest in the Hammer series of Frankenstein films. I think the problem with this film is they made Cushing not as evil. It's almost like an alternative version of the Baron. However, it does look more expensive than usual. Good sets. So out of these 2 films, The Gorgon and The Evil of Frankenstein, I think I'd probably go with The Evil of Frankenstein as the better film. Partly because it's in the Hammer Frankenstein series of films. So that makes it a bit more entertaining to watch, even if it is one of the weaker entries in the series. So that's Terrance Fisher 0, Freddie Francis 1. The next 2 films is The Curse of the Werewolf from 1961 and Dr. Terror's House of Horrors from 1965. Both of these are 2 classic films, and I had trouble deciding which one I preferred. The Curse of the Werewolf, it's Hammer's only film that they made featuring werewolves. And Oliver Reed's great in this one. It's very much like a fairy tale sort of story, going on about how the boy was brought up and became a werewolf. The werewolf makeup looks amazing as well. They did a great job on the makeup. Unfortunately, you don't see much of the werewolf. It's just towards the end of the film that he's featured. And once again, Hammer were kind of keeping the monster in the shadows and only revealed towards the end. Ironically though, the makeup was that good that they should have featured the werewolf more. You don't see much of it just towards the end, which is it's a shame, because it's one of the best looking werewolves. They must have thought they were going to have poor makeup, so that they kept the werewolf out of the film a lot. So it's one of Hammer's best. Real great film. I'll have to review it sometime. The second film's Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, and I've reviewed this one on the channel. It's the first of the famous Amicus anthology films. Although it's the first one, it's one of the best. It's another Peter Cushing Christopher Lee team-up film. 5 different stories, and the Lincoln story is brilliant as well, set on a train, where Peter Cushing's reading them the fortunes using tarot cards. I especially like the Christopher Lee short story where there's a crawling hand. And other stories feature vampires, werewolves. One of the power stories though is the Creep and Vine story. That lets the film down a little bit. But both of these films are great, two classic films, so I had trouble picking which one I like best. But I've got to go for The Curse of the Werewolf. So that's Terrance Fisher 1, Freddie Francis 1. Round 3 featured The Mummy from 1959 and The Ghoul from 1975. So I've reviewed The Mummy on the channel, and this is one of the better Hammer mummy films. It's yet another Christopher Lee Peter Cushing team up. Lee plays the mummy, great makeup, and this is one of the best looking Hammer films. It really looks expensive. I always remember the mummy attack where there's this guy in this cell, it's padded, and the mummy breaks through the window up a height. Really tense scene where he strangles the man, and the mummy looks really menacing. Christopher Lee's height, he looks like a giant in this one. So it's a remake of the Universal mummy films. It's more the Lon Chaney Jr. type of mummy films than the original from 1932. The next film's The Ghoul from 1975. This is a Tyburn film. It looks like a Hammer film. It stars Peter Cushing, and this has a great cast. Not only is Cushing in, but John Hurt's in. Really good cast. It has a real menacing feel to it, this deserted house where there's something going on. And Cushing's performance is brilliant in this film. He uses photos of his late wife to give him more emotion during his performance. Great job he did in this film. There's scenes where he's in tears. He's such a good actor, and he gives these brilliant performances in these films. And I think this one's an underrated gem. It doesn't get mentioned much. So out of them two films, I'm going to give it to The Ghoul.
My wife is dead. I'm sorry. But when you said we, I assumed... I always think of us as still being together.
So that's Terrance Fisher 1, Freddie Francis 2. Round 4, and we have Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell from 1974 and The Legend of the Werewolf from 1975. So this is the 6th and final film in the Cushing Frankenstein series. This is his swan song performance as the Baron. And I've reviewed this one on the channel. He gives a great performance as well, like a sad, weary performance. As all these failures are getting to him. And it's set in an asylum where all the inmates are getting killed and operated on to make this monster. The monster looks alright, but in places it looks a bit rubbery, and the film does look a little bit cheaper than usual. Just one location, the asylum. The ending's good, where it seems as though the Baron's totally cracked. He's going on about making a new monster. It's as if all these failures have unhinged him. And he's in the right place, a mental asylum. So that's kind of how I take the ending, that he became crazy. Great way to end the series. The second film's another Tyburn film. It stars Peter Cushing. Very similar to The Curse of the Werewolf. It's almost like a remake of that film. It looks very much like a Hammer film. Even Michael Ripper pops up in it. And the werewolf looks good. Another interesting thing is Anthony Hines, under his pseudonym John Elder. He wrote both of the films, The Curse of the Werewolf and this one. However, it's not as good as The Curse of the Werewolf. And although the werewolf looks good, the makeup's not as good as The Curse of the Werewolf. So I think out of these two films, I've got to give it to Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell.
Why was he here?
Homicidal tendencies. He was fascinated by broken glass. He liked stabbing people in the face with it.
So that's Terrance Fisher 2, Freddie Francis 2. Round 5's an interesting one, because it's two Hammer Dracula films up against each other. and I've reviewed both on the channel. The first one's Dracula 1958 and the second film's Dracula's Risen from the Grave from 1966. So Cushing and Leigh once again teaming up, Leigh Dracula, Cushing Van Helsing. And this is highly regarded by fans. They say this is their favourite Hammer film. And although I do like it, it's an excellent film, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's my favourite. The problem with the film is Michael Gough. I thought his performance was a bit wooden and he slows the film down a bit for me. However, the film has some terrific moments. I love the scene where the female vampire gets staked and she turns from this beautiful woman into this old hag. And the ending's great where you see Dracula disintegrate. It's one of the best deaths in the series. And it improves every time I watch this film. It is a masterpiece. However, I don't class it as my favourite Hammer film. The second film, Dracula's Risen from the Grave, this was the first horror film I watched as a kid, and I was terrified by the ending after the film finished, where Dracula falls on this cross and you see his eyes turn red and he starts to cry blood. I thought that was really chilling at the time, and I still think this is my favourite in the Dracula Hammer series. Even though Peter Cushing's not in, I thought that the other cast were great and you don't really miss Cushing. And Freddie Francis, he does some terrific direction. He also uses tinted lenses when Dracula's about, so the edge of the screen has a tint. This is to emphasise evil. I thought that was really clever. Out of these two films, although I love both of them, I've got to give it to Dracula's Risen from the Grave.
Done this thing? Who has done this thing?
So that's Terrance Fisher 2, Freddie Francis 3. Round 6, the penultimate round, and we have The Phantom of the Opera from 1962 against Tales from the Crypt 1972. So Herbert Lom, he's the Phantom in this film, and although it's a good film, it looks cheap compared to other versions of The Phantom of the Opera. When you watch The Phantom of the Opera, you expect this real epic film, and this one's a bit cheap looking. Interesting that they were considering having Cary Grant to be in this film, and that would have made the film a heck of a lot more interesting if they managed to get Cary Grant in. It's a pity they didn't. So it's still a good film though, but kind of average really. However, the next film, Tales from the Crypt, that's one of my favourite Amicus anthology films. This and From Beyond the Grave, I can never decide which two of them films are my favourites. But this one's a masterpiece. 5 stories connected with a Lincoln story, and every 5 of the stories is excellent. It's based on the AC comics from the 50s, and although it's based on comics, you would think it would be kind of like campy humour, but it isn't. It's played totally seriously. Amicus did another film based on AC Comics, Vault of Horror, but this is a much better film than that one. Peter Cushing's in one of the stories, playing a character called Arthur Grimsdyke, and it's brilliant. It's probably the best of the 5 stories. You really feel sorry for his character. He uses his wife's photo again to give him emotion in the film, and you feel really sorry when he commits suicide. Great performance. And when he comes back as a zombie, the makeup's great. I also like the Joan Collins story right at the beginning of the film, where she's menaced by this Santa Claus outside her house. It's actually quite hard-hitting horror, this film. There's a story where this man, that he has 3 wishes, and his wife makes him be alive forever, but she hacks his body up with an axe, and you see his hands crawling around. Really hard-hitting horror, that. I'll definitely have to review that film sometime. So out of these 2 films, I'm definitely giving it to Tales from the Crypt. Absolute classic.
A tree is beautiful if its owner prunes it, but our town isn't, because your presence ruins it. Some people live in the country, some people live in the town. Why don't you do us a service? jump in the river.
So that's Terrance Fisher 2, Freddie Francis 4. The final round is The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1959 and Tales That Witness Madness from 1973. So Hammer's The Hound of the Baskervilles, I've just recently reviewed it on the channel. Cushing and layering again. Cushing plays Holmes and he's good, but my favourite Holmes is Basil Rathbone or Jeremy Brett. I think them two were amazing as Holmes, whereas Peter Cushing, he's kind of second rate compared to them two. It is a nice looking production though. However, the Hound looks a bit disappointing, just ordinary dog, and it's sort of patch off the Basil Rathbone version. Tales That Witness Madness, it's an anthology film with 4 different stories and a Lincoln story. And this has an amazing cast. Joan Collins, Donald Pleasance, that's just to name a few. And this is an underrated gem. You don't hear much of this film either. It's very much like the Amicus anthology films. And I think my favourite story of the 4 is the Penny Farthing story, where he goes on the Penny Farthing and goes back in time. I think that one's great fun. And you see a painting of this ancestor, Uncle Albert, and his face keeps changing on the painting. I thought that was hilarious. So out of them 2 films, I'm definitely giving it to Tales That Witness Madness. So that's the final score. Terrance Fisher 2, Freddie Francis 5. So Freddie Francis wins. But 14 great films. It's amazing the filmographies of both directors. They made some terrific films, and that was just a few of the great films that they made. There's plenty others. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe and share. Bye everybody. Bye. Bye.